The bank employees rudely kick out a black man, considering him an insignificant customer. They have no idea that soon they will be faced with a shocking revelation. This man is the owner of the bank. How will their behavior change when the truth comes out? Subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching this from. Isaac Fielding, the founder of Fielding Bank, stood before the mirror, adjusting his coat with a careful hand. For years, he had built his bank with the promise of excellent service and respect for every client. But recent reports had disturbed him. Rumors of staff treating ordinary clients with blatant disregard. Frustrated and determined to uncover the truth himself, Isaac made a bold decision. He would go undercover, experience the service as a regular customer, and see what his employees truly thought of clients who didn't flaunt wealth or power. Dressed in simple, nondescript clothes, Isaac left behind his usual tailored suits, confident stride, and polished appearance. Today, he'd blend into the background, just another man hoping to resolve a minor issue at the bank. A test, he thought, one he hoped his staff would pass. He took only his ID and a small modest wallet, nothing that might give him away. He opted for the third largest branch in the city, where the manager, he recalled, was known for his discipline but also a somewhat formal attitude. Isaac had met him once, briefly, but doubted he'd be recognized out of context and in different attire. As he approached the bank's entrance, he paused for a moment, observing the marble steps and gold-lettered signage above the doors. The building itself projected confidence and success, a reflection of all he'd worked for. He pushed open the doors, stepping inside. A faint hum of murmured conversations and the soft tapping of keyboards filled the space. Staff members moved around with a calculated efficiency, each one appearing fully engrossed in their tasks. Isaac took a breath, trying to imagine how this would feel to a regular visitor. The lobby was polished, and the scent of fresh coffee drifted faintly from a waiting area on the right, where plush leather chairs sat neatly arranged for clients. He was early. The branch had just opened. A few clients were seated already, each glancing around with a polite impatience. He joined the line, feeling its slow progression and noticing how some staff members seemed far from eager to quicken their pace. When his turn finally came, he approached the teller, a young woman with her hair tied back in a severe bun. Without looking up, she muttered, "Next?" Isaac cleared his throat, beginning his query with a polite tone, but her dismissive look was enough to make him pause. She responded tersely, her eyes briefly flicking to his simple clothing, as if assessing his worth. "Sir, I don't handle that kind of inquiry. You'll need to go to window 5, she said with a slight edge in her voice, waving him off as if he were an inconvenience. Isaac felt a prick of irritation but nodded and moved to the window she indicated, keeping his calm. At window 5, he was greeted with a similar expression of vague impatience. This time, the man, a teller in his mid-30s with a bored look, barely glanced at him as Isaac explained his question. "Look, for basic transfers, you're better off with the ATMs in the lobby," he said flatly, tapping his pen as if to dismiss the conversation. "I just need a bit of guidance on," Isaac began again, but the teller interrupted with a sigh. "Like I said, the ATM can do that. I really don't have time to explain every little thing." This time, Isaac's frustration grew. He was used to respectful, attentive service, especially in a place that bore his name. But here, his polite inquiries seemed to warrant only contempt. His words were met with glances of amusement, faint smirks, and eyes that rolled in thinly veiled derision. Standing in the lobby, he took in the muted looks that passed between the tellers as if this ordinary man didn't belong. His expectations of courteous help seemed to evaporate, replaced by a creeping sense of exclusion. Moving again, Isaac approached another employee, hoping to resolve the issue with more understanding. The man, a young banker in a pressed suit, looked him over with an expression that barely masked his irritation. "Sir, we're very busy right now," he said, his voice laced with impatience. "Our clients expect timely service." The implication was clear. Isaac, in his plain clothes, didn't count as one of those important clients. Trying not to reveal his mounting anger, Isaac explained his question yet again, but this time he was met with a scoff and a pointed look. "Perhaps," the banker said with an almost amused tone, "this isn't the right bank for you. We cater to clients who understand our services and don't need hand-holding." The way he said hand-holding grated on Isaac's nerves. He had built this bank precisely to offer a supportive environment to all clients, regardless of background or experience. Hearing his own values mocked by an employee stung deeply, but he bit back a reply, choosing instead to observe. Taking a step back, Isaac watched how the staff moved and interacted with clients. There was a tangible difference in how they treated those who appeared wealthy versus those who didn't. Older clients or those in simple attire received impatient stares and indifferent responses, while professionally dressed clients were greeted warmly, their questions answered promptly. The stark contrast unsettled him. A faint anger stirred as he recognized a level of bias he'd never intended to exist in his organization. At that moment, a group of staff members walked by, chatting amongst themselves, their glances flitting over him with barely contained disdain. Isaac felt the weight of their judgment in the flickers of their eyes, and as they walked away, he caught a comment muttered under a breath. "Probably doesn't even have a checking account." The snide remark hit Isaac harder than he anticipated. How many clients had faced this same treatment? How many had walked out feeling less than human, dismissed because of their appearance or their status? Shaken but resolved, Isaac decided to test the boundaries of their disrespect. He walked up to the manager's office, a modest, glass-fronted space where the branch manager was speaking with another client. Waiting patiently outside, Isaac noted the subtle differences in how he was treated compared to others. He waited and waited. The client inside was soon replaced by another, and Isaac continued to be ignored, his presence treated as inconsequential. Growing weary, he finally approached the door and gave a light knock. The manager looked up, irritation flashing across his face as he glanced at Isaac, barely suppressing his annoyance. "Yes?" he barked, his tone far from welcoming. Isaac explained his issue, hoping that as a higher authority the manager would show a greater willingness to assist. But instead, the manager sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Sir, we have specific channels for queries like yours. Perhaps, if you consulted the support team, you wouldn't have to interrupt my day." Isaac's patience was nearly at its end. "I simply needed a brief consultation. This is my bank, too, you know." The manager raised an eyebrow, an amused sneer crossing his face. "Oh, I'm sure it is. But we're a professional institution, and I'm afraid we have little time for small matters. Try a different branch if you're dissatisfied." The statement was laced with condescension, and Isaac realized he was being subtly dismissed, his concerns minimized and mocked. At that moment, a security guard approached, alerted by the manager's subtle nod. The guard positioned himself near Isaac, his stance firm. "Is there a problem here, sir?" the guard asked, his tone dripping with unspoken judgment. Isaac's jaw tightened, but he simply shook his head, holding his composure. No problem," he replied. "I'll just be on my way." With a final, searing look, Isaac turned and left, each step echoing with his mounting frustration and hurt. Isaac walked away from the bank with a tightness in his chest and a surge of mixed emotions churning within him: shock, anger, and an overwhelming sense of disbelief. The bank, his bank, had treated him, its founder, with nothing short of contempt. Yet this was precisely why he had chosen to test the waters anonymously. Now, as he took measured breaths, he prepared himself to go back and dig deeper, to see if the attitudes he encountered were isolated or indicative of a systemic problem. Determined, Isaac returned to the bank later that same day, this time with a firmer resolve. He entered through the same doors, once again blending into the background with his inconspicuous attire. As he re-entered, he noticed a slight shift in the mood of the staff. They had seen him earlier and seemed to recognize him as the unimportant client who had returned, much to their apparent dismay. He could feel the weight of their dismissive glances even before he approached a teller. Isaac stepped up to the counter once again, choosing a different employee this time, a young man in his early 20s who wore a smug look of authority. The young man looked up with a hint of irritation, his gaze skimming over Isaac with obvious disinterest. "Yes?" he drawled, as if the single word alone was a favor. Isaac kept his voice steady, requesting help with a routine transaction. Instead of responding with professionalism, the teller sighed dramatically and rolled his eyes. "I told you, we're really busy. Use the ATM, that's what it's for." Isaac, sensing an opportunity to test the teller's patience, politely asked if the teller could assist him directly, explaining that he wasn't familiar with the newer features. At this, the teller's eyes hardened, his gaze becoming openly hostile. "Look," he said, his voice tinged with sarcasm, "it's not that hard. You put your card in, press a few buttons, and voila, your money's transferred." The remark drew a few smirks from nearby employees who were clearly listening in, and Isaac could feel their eyes on him, waiting to see how he would respond. A slight murmur of amusement passed through the tellers behind the counter, some of whom exchanged glances and smirks. Isaac held his composure, though he could feel his irritation bubbling beneath the surface. He tried to reason with the teller one last time. "I just need a bit of guidance. Isn't that part of your job?" he asked, maintaining a polite tone. The young teller let out a small laugh, his lips curling into a sneer. "Maybe in some banks, sure, but we don't exactly have time to cater to every little issue that walks in off the street, especially when there are bigger clients waiting." The statement was loud enough for others in the lobby to hear, and Isaac saw a few heads turn, the other clients casting quick glances of sympathy his way. But none spoke up. Feeling a flicker of indignation, Isaac glanced at the manager's office, hoping for some intervention. But the manager remained at his desk, engrossed in his own work, his face turned away from the unfolding scene. Realizing he was on his own, Isaac pressed on, hoping to get the teller to address his issue. But the teller leaned back, crossing his arms with an air of arrogance. "Tell you what," he said with mock cheer, "why don't you take a seat and wait? Maybe I'll help you when I get a free moment. If I get a free moment." Isaac held the teller's gaze, remaining silent, refusing to give the young man the satisfaction of seeing him flustered. Eventually, Isaac stepped back, accepting defeat, but feeling the sting of the experience deep within. He took a seat as instructed, all the while observing how the teller and other employees interacted with clients who looked more important. Well-dressed clients received immediate attention, quick assistance, and warm smiles, while those who seemed ordinary or unfamiliar with the banking system received little more than terse responses and dismissive gestures. Sitting in the waiting area, Isaac overheard an older man approach the same teller who had dismissed him. The man's request was simple, but the teller's response mirrored the arrogance and impatience Isaac himself had encountered. "Sir, I already told you. We don't have time to walk everyone through each transaction," the teller said with clear exasperation. The older man, visibly embarrassed, muttered an apology and stepped back, his face flushed with frustration. Isaac clenched his fists, appalled at the treatment of a fellow client, but he knew he needed to hold back his reaction. He still needed to see how far this culture of arrogance extended. Deciding to try his luck again, Isaac rose and approached another teller at a different counter. This time the employee, a middle-aged woman with a cold, impatient expression, looked him over before sighing as if he were a burden. Isaac stated his request again, doing his best to remain polite. "Is there someone here who could help me with this transaction?" The woman's eyebrows shot up, and she scoffed openly. "Didn't the last teller tell you to use the ATM?" she asked, a sneer in her voice. Isaac nodded. "Yes, but I was hoping someone here could assist me personally." She shook her head, exasperated. "Well, we're not here to hold hands. You're at a bank, not a daycare. If you can't handle a simple transaction, maybe you should consider finding a different bank, one that deals with simpler clients." Isaac felt his face flush, though he did his best to remain composed. Her words hit him harder than he expected, and he wondered how often this treatment was meted out to clients who didn't appear wealthy or important. Still, he pressed on. "I understand you're busy, but as a client, I would appreciate a bit of patience," he replied, keeping his tone even. But the teller merely smirked, glancing over her shoulder as if sharing the moment with nearby colleagues who stifled laughter. "You know, patience isn't really our job. Efficiency is. So if you want help, try coming back during off-peak hours. We don't have time for special requests right now." Her tone was icy, condescending, and Isaac could see her colleagues nodding in silent agreement, their faces marked with expressions of approval and disdain. Feeling the frustration mounting, Isaac took a step back, realizing he was unlikely to get any genuine assistance from the current staff. But he was far from done. He made a final attempt, approaching the manager's office directly. This time, he caught the manager's eye as he neared, and for a fleeting moment he thought the man might recognize him. Instead, the manager's expression darkened, and he motioned to Isaac to stay back. "I don't know what your issue is, but our staff has already told you what to do," the manager said, his tone clipped and dismissive. "I'd suggest you follow their instructions and stop disturbing the other clients." Isaac took a breath, feeling his patience slipping. "I simply wanted to speak to someone who could assist me with a simple request, that's all." The manager crossed his arms, his posture rigid and unyielding. "Then use the ATM. This isn't a personal assistance bureau. If you need that level of help, you may be better off at a smaller bank that can cater to unusual needs." The tone of mockery in his voice was unmistakable. Isaac felt a knot form in his stomach as he realized just how deep the contempt ran. These people, his own employees, were openly hostile and dismissive to anyone they deemed unworthy. Just then, the security guard from earlier approached, his face stern. "Is there an issue here, sir?" he asked, his tone heavy with unspoken suspicion. The manager didn't even look at him but muttered, "This gentleman has been causing a disturbance. Escort him out if he refuses to leave." Isaac looked at the guard, then back at the manager, feeling an anger he struggled to contain. "Is that how you treat all your clients?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The manager shrugged. "Only those who waste our time." At this, the security guard took Isaac by the arm, firmly guiding him toward the exit. As they walked past the counters, Isaac felt the weight of the staff's smirking gazes on him. He heard a faint chuckle, a few murmured words exchanged in mocking tones. Just as he was about to be ushered through the doors, one of the tellers called out, "Come back when you can afford to pay for the service." Isaac stopped, momentarily stunned by the sheer arrogance, but instead of reacting, he allowed the guard to escort him outside, his mind racing with the implications of what he'd witnessed. Isaac left the bank, his heart pounding with a mixture of disbelief and seething anger. He could hardly believe the extent of the arrogance and disregard he had just witnessed, not only as a regular customer, but as the very founder of the institution. The building he had worked tirelessly to establish as a symbol of trust, respect, and professionalism now felt like a stranger to him. He had always envisioned Fielding Bank as a haven for clients of all backgrounds, a place where people could feel secure and valued. But today, his vision had been shattered by the very people he had entrusted to uphold it. Back in his office that evening, he sat in the dim light, replaying every demeaning interaction, every dismissive glance, every mocking comment he had received. The more he thought about it, the more deeply disturbed he became. His bank, a place meant to offer support to everyone, had become a fortress of prejudice, where clients were only respected if they looked the part. It was evident that significant change was needed, and he knew he would have to start at the very top to ensure the culture he'd witnessed was completely uprooted. The next day, Isaac called an emergency meeting with his executive team. The room was quiet, tension filling the air as his senior staff exchanged worried glances. None of them knew why they had been summoned so urgently, but they could tell from Isaac's expression that something serious was brewing. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but charged with a steely determination that none of them had heard before. "Yesterday, I visited one of our branches as an ordinary client," he began, watching as their eyes widened in surprise. "I went in dressed as any other person might. No special treatment, no VIP pass. Just a man with a simple question about a basic transaction." A ripple of shock moved through the room, but Isaac continued before anyone could respond. "What I witnessed was appalling," he said, his tone darkening. "I was met with rudeness, condescension, and outright hostility. The staff not only ignored my requests but openly mocked me, dismissed my questions, and ultimately had me escorted out by security. They treated me as if I were less than nothing, because I didn't look important." He let his words sink in, watching as the expressions of his executives turned from surprise to horror. "This is not the bank I built," he said, his voice unwavering. "This is not what Fielding Bank is supposed to represent. We're supposed to be a place of trust and dignity, where every client, regardless of appearance or background, feels respected and valued. But yesterday, I saw that we have lost sight of that mission." A few executives shifted uncomfortably, glancing around the room, but Isaac's gaze held them captive. "I'm not going to let this continue," he declared. "Effective immediately, we're initiating a complete audit of our customer service policies and protocols. Every employee who interacted with me yesterday will be reviewed, and any further incidents of disrespect toward clients will result in immediate disciplinary action." Isaac's chief operations officer, a cautious man named Howard, raised his hand slightly. his face pale. "Sir, I, I think we can address this more discreetly. A full audit might be—" But Isaac cut him off with a sharp look. "No, Howard. Discretion is what allowed this to happen in the first place. We need transparency. We need accountability. Our clients deserve that much, and I will not compromise on this." The room fell silent once more, and Isaac leaned forward, folding his hands on the table. "I'm going to return to that branch," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "But this time I'll be coming in as the founder and owner of this bank. I want every one of those employees to see who they dismissed and humiliated yesterday. And I want them to understand that their actions will have consequences." As he left the meeting, Isaac's mind was already racing with plans. He contacted his HR director and instructed her to prepare a team to accompany him on his return visit. The team would conduct on-the-spot evaluations with strict instructions to assess not only the employee's knowledge, but also their attitude and respect toward every client, regardless of perceived status. Over the next few days, Isaac finalized the preparations, making sure that his return to the branch would be as impactful as possible. His decision to return was not just a means of personal vindication. It was a message, one that he hoped would resonate throughout every branch of Fielding Bank. On the morning of his planned return, Isaac dressed in his usual attire, a tailored suit, polished shoes, and a sharp tie that spoke of authority and purpose. He was joined by a small team of senior managers who would observe the interactions and help facilitate immediate changes in the branch if necessary. As they approached the bank, Isaac felt a calm resolve settle over him. Today, there would be no mockery, no sneering faces, no dismissive gestures. Today, they would see him as he was, the founder and leader of the very institution they served. Entering the bank, Isaac's team spread out, each member observing different aspects of the staff's conduct and handling of clients. As he walked in, the employees who had interacted with him during his previous visit did a double take, their faces registering shock and panic as they recognized him in his full authority. The young teller who had laughed at him, the woman who had dismissed him with a smirk, and the manager who had all but ordered his removal now stood frozen, their expressions a mixture of confusion and dread. Isaac approached the counter calmly, his eyes locking onto each staff member who had treated him with disrespect. He gestured for them to gather, watching as they reluctantly moved closer, glancing at each other with apprehension. He allowed the silence to settle before he spoke, his voice low but commanding. "Do you remember me?" he asked, looking directly at the young teller who had laughed at his questions. The teller swallowed hard, his face paling as he stammered, "Yes, sir. I didn't realize." Isaac cut him off, his gaze unyielding. "Didn't realize what? That you were speaking to someone who mattered? That you were speaking to someone who deserved basic respect?" He turned his attention to the others, his eyes cold and calculating. "And what about you?" He addressed the woman who had scoffed at his request. "Did you think it was acceptable to dismiss a client's questions because they didn't look important to you?" She opened her mouth to speak, but he silenced her with a raised hand. "No excuses," he said, his tone sharp. "This isn't just about me. This is about every client who walks through those doors expecting respect and receiving none." He motioned for the manager to join the group, watching as the man shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. "You," he said, his voice cold, "you allowed this culture to fester in your branch. You encouraged this attitude of superiority and contempt. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" The manager's face turned a shade of red, his eyes darting to the floor. I'm sorry, Mr. Fielding. I had no idea." "No idea?" Isaac's voice rose slightly, anger lacing his words. How could you not know? This behavior was blatant. It was systematic. Either you ignored it deliberately, or you simply didn't care. He paused, letting his words sink in, then continued in a measured tone. Well, now you will care. Because as of this moment, every one of you is under review. Every action, every word, every client interaction will be scrutinized. And if any of you are found to treat clients with anything less than the respect they deserve, you will no longer work here. The employees glanced at each other, fear evident on their faces. Isaac's voice softened slightly, though it retained its steely edge. Fielding Bank was built on principles of integrity, respect, and fairness. Those principles apply to everyone who walks through our doors. And if you can't uphold those values, then this is not the place for you. He turned to his HR director, who had been observing the exchange with a clipboard in hand. You have my full support to make any necessary changes in staffing, he said. Let's start with immediate evaluations. With that, Isaac turned back to the staff, his gaze steady. Today marks the beginning of a new standard in this branch. You will be watched closely, and I expect nothing less than excellence from each of you. Isaac returned to the bank the next day with a steely resolve, prepared to follow through with the sweeping changes he had set in motion. This time he was not alone. Alongside him were senior executives from the bank's HR department, as well as a few close advisors who had been briefed on the situation and were ready to witness the consequences unfold. They all knew this was more than a disciplinary visit. It was a decisive moment in Fielding Bank's history, one that would set the standard for how clients were treated going forward. The branch employees were unaware of his planned arrival that morning, going about their usual routines with the same sense of casual authority and complacency. They had yet to understand the gravity of their actions, to realize that their behavior toward unimportant clients had not gone unnoticed by the highest echelons of the bank. When Isaac and his team walked through the glass doors, the atmosphere in the branch shifted immediately. Isaac, in his sharp, tailored suit and with an air of unmistakable authority, was a far cry from the man who had been dismissed as irrelevant just days prior. As he stepped forward, employees froze, their faces transforming from expressions of casual indifference to ones of confusion, then dawn and horror as recognition set in. The young teller who had mocked his request stared in stunned silence, his face blanching as he realized who Isaac truly was. The manager, who had all but ordered him out of the branch, went pale, his mouth parting slightly as though in shock. Slowly, Isaac scanned the faces of each employee who had treated him with such disdain. He allowed the silence to stretch, watching the weight of realization settle on them. With a slow, deliberate tone, he finally spoke. I am Isaac Fielding, the founder and CEO of Fielding Bank, he announced, his voice cold and unyielding. I came to this branch a few days ago as an ordinary client, seeking nothing more than a simple service and a respectful interaction. He paused, letting the words sink in, and observed as their faces fell, the tension growing with every heartbeat. Instead, he continued, his voice rising slightly, I was met with disrespect, arrogance, and outright contempt. The staff members here made it clear that they did not see me as worthy of their time or patience. Because I did not look important enough, I was treated as though I did not matter. His gaze moved from one employee to the next, his eyes cold and piercing. The young teller who had mocked him shifted uncomfortably, swallowing hard as he averted his gaze. The manager visibly tensed, beads of sweat forming on his forehead as he avoided eye contact. Isaac continued, his voice unwavering. This branch, my bank, has become a place where clients are judged by their appearance, where those who seem ordinary are dismissed without a second thought, and where people who seek basic assistance are mocked, ignored, or treated with disdain. This is not the bank I built. This is not the culture I envisioned. He turned to the HR director beside him, giving her a brief nod. She stepped forward, clipboard in hand, and addressed the employees with a tone that left no room for argument, effective immediately. Each of you will undergo an intensive review process, she stated. Your conduct, your interactions, and your treatment of clients will be closely monitored. Those found guilty of disrespectful behavior will face immediate consequences. The employees exchanged nervous glances, the reality of the situation sinking in. The HR director continued, her voice unyielding. We will also be implementing mandatory training sessions focusing on customer service, empathy, and respect. Fielding Bank will no longer tolerate this culture of superiority and disregard for clients. Isaac watched as the expressions of fear and embarrassment deepened among the employees, especially those who had treated him so poorly. He felt a cold satisfaction at the justice being served, but he was not done yet. He stepped forward again, looking directly at the young teller who had been particularly dismissive. You, he said, his tone pointed. Tell me, what was it that made you think it was acceptable to laugh at a client's question, to dismiss them as though they were wasting your time? The teller's face turned scarlet, and he stammered, I didn't realize. I didn't know. Isaac's gaze hardened. Didn't know what? That every person who walks through those doors deserves to be treated with respect? The teller looked down, shame washing over his face. Isaac turned his attention to the woman who had smirked when he'd asked for assistance. And you, he said, his voice sharp. Do you think it's acceptable to tell clients to go elsewhere because you don't consider their questions worth your time? She shook her head, unable to meet his gaze, her confidence shattered. He allowed the silence to stretch, letting them feel the weight of their actions. Finally, he addressed the manager, the very man who had sent security to escort him out. And you, as a manager, Isaac said, his voice filled with controlled fury, you set the tone for this entire branch. You allowed this culture of arrogance and condescension to flourish. You encouraged your staff to see clients not as people, but as inconveniences. The manager's face was ashen, and he stumbled over his words, attempting a weak apology. Mr. Fielding, I had no idea it was you. If I'd known, Isaac cut him off, his voice like steel. It should not have mattered who I was. Every client should be treated with dignity, whether they are the CEO or an ordinary person. The fact that you only value clients based on appearances is exactly the problem. This attitude will no longer be tolerated. Not here, not in any branch of Fielding Bank. He turned to his HR director, nodding firmly. Proceed with the evaluations, he said. I want a full report on every employee's conduct by the end of the week. The HR director acknowledged his command, and the staff, realizing the gravity of the situation, fell silent, their faces a mixture of shame and regret. Isaac took one last look at the employees gathered before him. He knew some would not last through the reviews, and others would face severe consequences for their behavior. But this was more than punishment. It was a statement of the bank's core values, a reminder that respect was non-negotiable. This is only the beginning, he said, his voice carrying the weight of his commitment to change. Fielding Bank will return to its original principles of fairness and respect, and I will make sure of it. For those of you who are willing to align with these values, you have my support. But for those who cannot uphold them, you are free to leave. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving the employees to ponder the full extent of their actions and the changes that would reshape their future at Fielding Bank. The aftermath of Isaac's visit to the bank branch was felt immediately. The employees who had once held smug attitudes, confident in their authority, were now on edge, understanding the repercussions that awaited them. Rumors quickly spread through the branch, each story more exaggerated than the last. Some employees claimed Isaac had already decided to fire half the branch, while others whispered that he was planning to replace the entire team. The uncertainty hung heavy in the air, creating a palpable tension among the staff. Isaac had left instructions with the HR director and the senior management team to begin a rigorous audit of the branch. Every employee who had interacted with him was called in for one-on-one meetings, where they were asked to explain their actions and attitudes, not just toward him, but toward all clients. In each meeting, the HR director posed difficult questions, her tone measured but stern. "Tell me," she would start, her pen poised above her clipboard, "do you believe it is acceptable to dismiss a client's question based on their appearance? What makes you think your time is more valuable than theirs?" The employees would stammer, shifting in their seats as they tried to justify their behavior. But the HR director's gaze was unyielding. Those who had treated Isaac with outright disdain, like the young teller and the manager, found themselves under the most intense scrutiny. The HR team combed through each employee's records, looking for any patterns of complaints or signs of misconduct. Reports of past client dissatisfaction were reevaluated, with special attention given to cases where clients had reported feeling disrespected or ignored. Patterns began to emerge. It wasn't just Isaac's experience that had highlighted the branch's toxic culture. Dozens of other clients had faced similar treatment. Elderly clients, those unfamiliar with modern banking technology, people dressed modestly, and even clients who simply asked a few extra questions were all dismissed, their requests handled with impatience or even disdain. Isaac read every report, the knot of anger in his chest growing tighter with each case. His bank had become a place where appearance dictated service quality, where people were judged the moment they walked through the doors. His staff had developed a hierarchy of clients based solely on assumptions. The more he read, the clearer it became that a sweeping change was necessary. He couldn't risk allowing such toxic attitudes to permeate his bank any longer. After days of evaluation, the HR team compiled a list of employees whose records showed consistent disrespect toward clients. Those employees were immediately suspended, with notices informing them that their actions had led to a thorough reevaluation of their employment. Among those listed were the young teller, who had laughed at Isaac's questions, and the manager, who had allowed such behavior to thrive in his branch. Their records were marked with incidents of misconduct, warnings they had received in the past, and specific examples of their recent actions. Isaac made a point to review each file personally, determined to ensure that his decisions were fair but firm. He wasn't dismissing employees out of vengeance. He was taking action to restore the bank's values. His ultimate goal was to create an environment where respect was a given, not a privilege based on status. On the day the suspension notices were issued, a somber atmosphere settled over the branch. The employees called into the HR office emerged with pale faces, some visibly shaken, others hardened with resentment. Word quickly spread among the remaining staff that the consequences were real, that Isaac was determined to eradicate any trace of the toxic culture that had taken root. Those who hadn't been suspended were given a stern reminder of the bank's principles. They were informed of a new code of conduct, one that would be strictly enforced. Respect empathy, and patience were no longer optional, but required qualities for every interaction. The staff was also informed of mandatory customer service training that would begin immediately, with a focus on understanding and valuing every client. Resistance to the changes was met with a simple choice: adapt or leave. Isaac made it clear that those who could not or would not uphold the bank's values would not have a place there. For many employees, the reality of the situation began to sink in, and a quiet determination to improve replaced the once casual indifference. Among those who remained, there was an unspoken agreement that the bank's standards had changed, that clients would no longer be dismissed based on appearances. Isaac watched these changes unfold with a sense of grim satisfaction. He had not wanted it to come to this, but he was resolute. The values he had built his bank upon were non-negotiable, and he would do whatever it took to ensure they were respected. As part of the new training, the HR team conducted role-play sessions where employees practiced handling difficult situations with empathy and patience. Scenarios were created to mimic real-life client interactions, with actors playing clients from all walks of life. The employees who once balked at the idea of assisting ordinary clients now found themselves in simulated situations where they had to demonstrate respect and courtesy, regardless of the client's background or demeanor. Isaac attended several of these sessions, observing as his employees struggled to break old habits and adopt a more client-centered approach. At first, some of them faltered, their ingrained arrogance slipping through in subtle expressions or tones of voice. But over time, with guidance and feedback, he saw genuine progress. He watched as employees who had once dismissed clients with a wave of the hand now listened attentively, showing patience and understanding, even under pressure. However, he knew that not everyone would change. For some employees, the arrogance and superiority ran too deep. After weeks of training, evaluations, and monitoring, it became clear who was truly committed to upholding the bank's values and who was resistant to change. Those who resisted were given a final choice: accept the new standards or be dismissed. Some chose to leave, unwilling to adopt what they saw as a demeaning approach to service. Isaac watched as these employees exited the bank, understanding that their departure was necessary for the bank's future. The training sessions became a foundation upon which the bank's new culture would be built. Each employee who passed through the program emerged with a renewed understanding of the bank's mission. They began to see their roles not as gatekeepers of exclusivity, but as stewards of a service open to everyone. Isaac took pride in these developments, knowing that he was witnessing the rebirth of Fielding Bank's values. Client feedback began to reflect the changes as well. The once dismissive staff now greeted clients with genuine warmth, handling each question with patience, no matter how simple or complex. The bank began receiving messages of gratitude from clients who appreciated the new approach. An elderly client wrote to the branch, thanking the staff for taking the time to walk her through an online transaction she'd struggled to understand. Another client, who had previously felt intimidated to ask questions, now felt comfortable approaching the tellers. Each message served as a reminder to Isaac that his decision to intervene had been necessary, that the hard choices he had made were paying off. But the changes went beyond the branch staff. Isaac knew that to truly transform Fielding Bank, the commitment to respect had to be present at every level. He initiated a mentorship program where senior employees coached newer hires on client interactions, teaching them the importance of empathy and patience. Branch managers were also held accountable, with regular evaluations assessing not just their performance, but the culture they fostered within their teams. Isaac met with each branch manager, setting expectations that went beyond financial targets. He emphasized that they were responsible for upholding the bank's values, for creating an environment where every client felt valued and respected. Managers who encouraged elitism or tolerated disrespectful behavior were warned that they would face the same consequences as the branch staff. The transformation was not easy, nor was it immediate. There were setbacks, instances where old habits resurfaced, and moments where employees struggled to embrace the new standards. But Isaac remained vigilant, addressing each issue with the same firm resolve that had guided him from the start. He knew that the journey to restore Fielding Bank's integrity would be a long one, but he was prepared for it. Gradually, Fielding Bank's reputation began to shift. Clients noticed the difference, word spread, and the bank began to attract a wider range of clientele, people who felt welcomed regardless of their background. The branch, where Isaac had first gone undercover, became a model for other locations, its staff setting an example of respect and professionalism. Isaac took a quiet pride in watching the branch evolve, knowing that his vision was becoming reality. Months had passed since Isaac's initial visit to the bank branch, a visit that had exposed the deep-rooted issues lurking within his institution. The transformations he had set in motion were starting to bear fruit, but the journey had been anything but simple. The strict evaluations, the intensive training, and the firm restructuring of each branch's values had slowly begun to create a culture Isaac could once again stand behind. Fielding Bank was steadily rebuilding its reputation, client by client, interaction by interaction. This morning, as Isaac walked into the main branch, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in years, he was confident that his bank was becoming the institution he had always envisioned. He was greeted warmly by the staff, who now recognized him as not just the founder, but as a hands-on leader dedicated to his bank's core values. He nodded to them in return, feeling a mutual respect that hadn't been there before. Today, he would visit each department, observe the new systems in action, and speak with the employees who had embraced the change. As he moved through the halls, he noticed the way his employees interacted with clients. The dismissive glances, the impatience, the subtle arrogance he had once observed were all but gone. In their place was a sense of genuine engagement, of empathy and professionalism that filled him with pride. The new staff training, developed in the wake of his visit, had become a fundamental part of Fielding Bank's operations. Every employee now went through rigorous customer service courses that emphasized respect, understanding, and patience with every client, no matter their appearance, background, or the nature of their requests. Isaac paused by a counter where a young teller was assisting an elderly client. The client, struggling with a basic digital transaction, apologized repeatedly for her slowness, clearly uncomfortable with her lack of technical knowledge. But the teller simply smiled, reassured her, and walked her through the process, speaking gently and offering words of encouragement. Isaac watched this scene, reminded of how such a simple act of patience had been so rare in his bank just months ago. As he continued through the branch, he stopped at various desks, engaging with employees, asking about their experiences with the new training. Each employee expressed appreciation for the shift, noting how they had grown to see their clients differently. The change hadn't come without challenges, but now they spoke about it as if it were second nature, a sign that the new culture was taking hold. One employee, a seasoned teller who had been with the bank for over a decade, approached him with a hesitant smile. "Mr. Fielding, I just wanted to thank you," she began, When I first heard about the changes, I was skeptical. I thought, why fix what's not broken? But now, I see the difference. Our clients notice it too. They come in relaxed, willing to ask questions. It feels good to help them, to know they trust us. Isaac felt a surge of pride and validation in her words. "Thank you for embracing the change," he replied. "This bank exists for our clients. I built it to serve everyone, and I'm grateful to see that vision come to life again." In addition to retraining his existing staff, Isaac had also initiated a mentorship program, pairing seasoned employees with new hires to instill the bank's values from the very beginning. This program had proven invaluable, as senior staff members passed down not only technical knowledge, but also a sense of duty and respect toward clients. Isaac was pleased to see seasoned employees who had once held dismissive attitudes, now embodying the very values he had hoped to restore. Isaac's journey through the bank that day culminated in a visit to a special meeting organized for clients. He had invited clients from all backgrounds to discuss their experiences with the bank, both past and present. He knew that listening to them directly was essential to fully understand the impact of the changes. The clients arrived one by one, taking their seats around the long table in the bank's conference room. Some had been with Fielding Bank for years, others were new, but each carried a unique story. Isaac welcomed them, his demeanor open and attentive, eager to hear their perspectives. One of the first to speak was an elderly man who had been a client since the bank's early days. He shared his memories of Fielding Bank's early years, speaking fondly of the respect and courtesy he had always experienced, until, that is, he noticed a gradual shift in attitude from the staff over recent years. "I used to feel like I was family here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But over time, it was as if I became invisible, like I didn't matter anymore. I almost left the bank because of it." Isaac listened closely, nodding as he took in the man's words. "But recently," the man continued, "I've seen something change. The staff are kind again, attentive. I feel respected. It reminds me of why I chose this bank in the first place." Isaac felt a sense of fulfillment in the man's words, grateful that the efforts were not only noticed but appreciated. Another client, a young woman, described her experience as a new client, recounting how she had been met with patience and understanding when she'd needed help setting up her accounts. She explained that her previous bank had made her feel out of place, as if she didn't belong. "But here, at Fielding Bank, I felt like I could ask any question, no matter how simple." "It's rare to feel that way," she said, smiling warmly. Isaac thanked each client, acknowledging the significance of their feedback. Each story reinforced his conviction that the bank was moving in the right direction. He assured them that their experiences would continue to be the driving force behind Fielding Bank's mission. As the meeting concluded, Isaac walked each client to the door, shaking their hands and thanking them personally. They left with a sense of reassurance, knowing that their voices had been heard. Isaac returned to his office feeling a deep sense of purpose. Fielding Bank was, once again, becoming a place where everyone was valued, a place where respect and empathy were central to its mission. That afternoon, Isaac held a final meeting with the senior management team to discuss the future. He outlined a plan to implement the successful policies and training programs across all branches, ensuring that the transformation would reach every corner of the institution. Each manager was tasked with upholding the new standards, not just in their interactions with clients, but in their leadership of the staff. "This isn't just about one branch," Isaac said, addressing his team. "We're rebuilding the reputation of Fielding Bank as a whole. Every branch, every employee, every client, everyone deserves to feel respected and valued here. This is our mission, and it's one we must uphold without exception." The managers nodded, each of them aware the weight of their roles in ensuring that the bank's new culture took root and thrived. Isaac ended the meeting by reinforcing the idea that respect was non-negotiable. Fielding Bank was on a journey to rebuild trust, and they were all responsible for that mission. Over the next few months, as the new standards were enforced and the training programs became an essential part of the bank's operations, Fielding Bank's reputation blossomed. Word spread of the bank's renewed commitment to respect and empathy, and clients began to notice the difference. Customer satisfaction ratings climbed, and the bank received letters of gratitude from clients who appreciated the attentiveness and genuine care they now encountered at every branch. Isaac continued to make personal visits to branches, ensuring that the culture he had worked so hard to cultivate was being upheld. Each time he visited, he found employees who were not only meeting expectations but exceeding them, embodying the spirit of service and respect he had always dreamed of for his bank. Standing in one of the branches one afternoon, watching a teller help a client with a smile and genuine interest, Isaac felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. His vision was alive again, stronger and clearer than ever. Fielding Bank had faced a challenging period, but it had emerged with a renewed purpose. For Isaac, this transformation was not only a victory, but a reminder of the power of integrity and the importance of staying true to one's values, even in the face of adversity. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel to not miss new stories, and stay tuned for the next and other videos. Your opinion is important to us. Leave comments and tell us what you would do if you were the hero. See you in new episodes.